Joined now by NHL insider Frank Seravalli of the Frankly Speaking podcast and the Daily Faceoff. And he was sitting there in Philadelphia last night, Blake, looking forward to the Roberto Luongo Ring of Honor ceremony, watching the Florida Panthers feed, because that's what was available to him on Bally's. Pick it up from there, Frank.
No bueno. That's what it was. I have no idea what they were thinking, but they, instead of playing the actual ceremony, which they were obviously in the building for and had cameras on because they would occasionally cut to shots of it without any audio, they decided, oh, now would be a good time to look back on our 2-year-old interview from when he went into the Hall of Fame, which said exactly nothing.
Yeah.
And so I was like, are they really not showing it? Is there some kind of technical difficulty? What's happening here? I was left wanting some Lou, and I had to get that on social media.
Maybe they just felt like it wasn't going to resonate with their crowd because he wasn't talking about the Panthers, I guess.
That makes no sense. He completely resonates with their. He has his number retired there and is actually a current employee of the team. Like it does not compute.
They didn't miss much. It was
what did you make though of Free the Flying Skate? Like, where the hell did that come from?
Loved it.
So address this in the opening block. I think one of three things. Roberto is very attuned to Vancouver Canucks fans and social medias. He talked about how yesterday that speech was to the fans. He wanted mostly just to address the fans directly. So I think A, he threw them a bone. B, he's just such a hockey nerd that he actually wants to see the skate jersey back. And we came to know a hockey nerd here in Vancouver. And the more cynical side of me, Frank, thinks, okay, you're going to put me in the Ring of Honor and not retire my number, and I have to answer all these uncomfortable questions? Well, I can throw an uncomfortable question back at you. Those are
I have a confession. Every year, and I know he doesn't listen to this program, so I can say it. Every year for Christmas, Santa gets my son a jersey from around the league, and I put his age on the jersey as the number so that it's like, hey, this is another year, and he's got a collection since he was 3 now. And every year I don't know what to pick. And I picked this year, Santa picked the Flying Skate. So
black or white?
Black. Okay. And it arrives on Monday, and I got to say, like, I'm kind of excited.
Yeah.
Who's the sharp? So the number will be what?
The number will be 10 this year.
10.
Very nice.
Avalbur, it's a retired number here.
Yeah, exactly.
In Vancouver. Well, what do you think? Should they have retired his number?
Without a doubt, stone cold slam dunk, and it's actually kind of offensive that they did. I mean, the fact that he is the franchise leader in all those categories, the fact that they got to a Stanley Cup final, which as far as the team has ever gone, and what he meant to the marketplace and the fan base through all the ups and downs. Like, he's an immensely popular figure, as you see again, all these years removed, still in Vancouver. The fact that you can only see fit to add him to the Ring of Honor when he was a first ballot Hall of Famer who did some of his very best work in a Canucks uniform, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, it almost feels like the Canucks are sending a message to him, which is like, hey, you were unreal, but you fall short of the ultimate honor. And I don't know what the thought process is in like, why do it at all then?
He's such an unclean story. Like, there's nothing straightforward about his tenure here in Vancouver, right down to the Stanley Cup final, which, if you say Stanley Cup final, Roberto Luongo, for most people, they think of the blow-ups in Boston, probably, forgetting he had 2 shutouts in that Stanley Cup final as well.
It's funny you said that, because I just wrapped up Daily Faceoff Live, and my co-host was Colby Cohen, who was a black ace on that Bruins team. And he was like, Luongo, top 5 goalie of all time. He goes, the only thing I can think of is him blowing the lead in the Cup final.
Yeah.
Because that got him a ring.
Well, I think this may well be one of those issues where we're so close to it. We see all the things that others outside the market don't. The one thing that is absolutely clean about Roberto Luongo and the Vancouver Canucks, he is the best goaltender in franchise history.
For sure.
Period. Full stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you
with all
can-
due respect to Kirk, like he's not even in the same arena.
Mhm. So, for what we always talk about, oh, was it a trade request? No, it was a mutual thing. As
By the
Roberto said.
way, so we just talked about Bally Sports. They played this interview and he said full on, and this is what made me do the double take, was like, he said full on in the interview that he did request a trade.
Well,
And
that
then-
was back,
and then
that
he
was the
had
Hall
this-
of Fame interview a couple of years ago, the one they threw to. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes, in
Oh, wow.
there he said, I requested a trade, and then he made a point this week in Van with the press conference to say, well, it wasn't really a trade request. And I'm sitting here going, what is happening right now? Why
Well-
is this being
Well, there's two
played?
different incidents though, right? So I don't think he requested a trade the second time, like when he eventually got to Florida. I think he did earlier with the my contract sucks when he wasn't traded ultimately. I think that was the request to be traded. And then
Well,
ultimately
Well, no.
He
No, no.
talked specifically and said, I asked for a trade and I asked to go to either Florida or Tampa. And he
I-
said the fact that I went to sleep, I went to take a nap before a game, and they called me. He said, Mike Gillis called me and said, you've been traded. And he said, where to? And he said, Florida. He said, I had to rub my eyes to make sure I wasn't dreaming.
So I think you got it backwards. I believe there was a mutual, as Gillis and Luongo pointed out this week, a mutual decision that they were going to try and move him on when the Leafs trade fell apart at the one deadline. I think after Torts picked Eddie Lack for the Heritage Classic, as opposed to Luongo, that's when I think we had a full-blown trade request. But the other thing, Frank, Connor Garland tried to argue with us earlier this year. Well, it's not really a trade request. Be prepared, my friend, in insiderdom. They're going to push back on the phrase trade request
Yes.
going
trust
forward
me,
and somehow
I'm
try and
well aware of-
sanitize that phrase.
I'm well aware of the semantics at play, which is why I obsess with how I word my reports and what I say and how I hedge, because someone is waiting always just around a corner to punch you in the face.
But why would he say my contract sucks if he hadn't requested the trade?
I don't know.
Why does it even matter? The point is, like,
He
you
wanted
wanted
out.
out.
Yeah.
He wanted
yeah,
out. That's a
yeah.
great way to phrase it,
Yeah.
Frank. He wanted out. Connor Garland, he wants out. Brock Besser last year, he wanted out. Roberto at one point wanted out.
Yeah.
Two of them are still here. One of them no longer wants out.
But why isn't his number retired?
And why isn't his number?
Mhm.
Is it because of some of the drama that played out?
I
Could be.
think it's in part because of him wanting out. I think it's in part because they look at it and go, he's really more Florida's guy than he's our guy. I think in part it's to preserve the feelings of Kirk McLean, who continues to work in the
No offense,
organization.
but Kirk, who cares? Like, if
How
that
about-
offends you that Roberto's number is retired, like, move on.
Different manager, different owner, Frank, 10 years from now. Would it be weird to elevate him?
Yeah, it would now after all this. Like, and the splits are so incredibly even. Like, I just had to look it up. 572 games as a Panther, 448 as a Canuck. The numbers are identical, 919 save percentage.
Yeah.
The wins, though, for playing 140 fewer games or 20 fewer games with the Canucks, he's got 22 more wins. Like,
Yep.
I'm sorry. Like, it's not even a debate. And I always think back to Flyers owner Ed Snyder, who I got to know so well. And his criteria was really simple. If you played a huge chunk of your career here and you're good enough for the Hockey Hall of Fame, that means you're good enough to have your number retired here.
Yeah. And he explained in his speech yesterday that you weren't able to see that he talked about the best times of my career were here. The peak, the pinnacle, the prime of his career was played
Because
here in
people
Vancouver.
cared.
Yeah. Well, not only that, he played on some excellent teams, right? Which he never got a chance to in Florida. So, yeah. And look, the one thing that everybody knows about Roberto is that he's like amongst the most competitive people that I've ever met. And so being in this arena, being in this cauldron, and Frank, to me, this was the favorite part of the speech last night. He talked about how Vancouver made him a better player and a better person, that he was too defensive, that he was too guarded, that he needed just to let his personality shine. So you're talking about a guy who had professional and personal growth here because of the intensity of this market, which is often something that isn't said when we talk about how difficult it is to play in a Canadian fishbowl.
Yeah.
How do you make a diamond? Do you apply significant pressure to it?
Yeah.
And
So Jordan Kyrou will have his number retired in St. Louis. Is that what you're suggesting here?
God, what? But first off, I didn't even know they had social media in Missouri. It's amazing how quickly they mobilized and reacted to a mostly innocuous.
Yes.
Like we're talking morning skate, say something, give a no comment. He's not my coach anymore to 7 p.m. puck drop. And this dude is being filleted at center ice.
I heard him being booed in the introductions, and I was like, good hockey market. Just the fact that they rallied that quickly, I was like, all right, this is a good market. Let's move on here, Frank. Ethan Bear is not going to be a Vancouver Canuck, it appears. And yet the number on the term is not crazy. Like I thought if somebody's going to give him 3 years, sure, you got to walk away from that. But at just 2, I mean, and it's a manageable cap number. I'm still a little surprised the Canucks still didn't go further down that boulevard.
I'm not, just because of it's pure cap space, right? Like you don't know how he's going to play.
Nope.
It's been a long layoff. Like I think there's a certain price that you set as a realistic standard for Ethan Bear. And if he accepts it, great. If not, move on, because you can get someone that could probably accomplish most of the same without any of the same headaches and no strings attached. Meaning, I don't want, no offense, I don't want Ethan Bear for any more than the rest of this year. I want to see how he plays and then make a determination moving forward as to his health, as to his game, as to his conditioning, maturity, all those things that have been huge question marks for Ethan Bear in the past that have never really been answered yet. But from his perspective, I think you have to take, even if it's just the second year, because of this. He's 26 and his career earnings are $7.4 million. Obviously not nothing, but he hasn't had some giant payday to rely on for security that if someone's offering you an additional couple $1,000,000, you take it.
Hey, we heard from Jim Rutherford this week. What's your sense of Rutherford and how long he is here for Vancouver? 2-year plus an option deal, I believe, when he signed. But we're past the 2-year mark. What do you think the future holds for Jim Rutherford here?
It's a really good question. And frankly, I was surprised when he took the deal to begin with. I was surprised to see him jump back in. I knew he wanted to, and I know there was always an itch for him to scratch, getting a chance to work in a Canadian market. And certainly the way things sort of devolved in Pittsburgh and his exit from there, that there was probably a feeling in his mind after a Hall of Fame career to not let it linger on that note. That said, he's accomplished a lot with Patrick Allvin and their management group in a pretty short period of time. Is now when you turn the reins over, or now, with my understanding, and I felt a little bit not guilty, but I wrote my story last week, a pure column, my opinion only, about Patrick Allvin and the work and how aggressive he's been so far this season should make him one of the front runners for GM of the year. But that sold Jim Rutherford's part of this process, I think, a little bit short, which is I think he's the guy more often than not that's pounding his fist on the table, not to do stuff, but he's right there with him actually getting the stuff done. So at his age, I think there's always a question of how much more do you want to work? And I think the easiest way to answer this will be he'll work as long as he wants to in Van with the job that they've done turning this around. And if he wants to take it year by year, like Jim Nill in Dallas, he told Stars owner Tom Ghilardi, look, like, I love it here. I love the work I'm doing, but at my age, I'm not sure how long I want to work. So let's just do it year by year.
Yeah, and you do wonder if he is able to secure some sort of practice facility solution for the Vancouver
Much
Canucks.
needed. I can't believe like that was my first time going to UBC to watch the team practice during camp earlier this year, and I couldn't believe that that's what an NHL team has to offer.
Yeah, and once that piece of the puzzle is solved, you do wonder whether he goes, okay, pieces are in place. Allvin's got the training wheels off, and who
by
knows
the way, I don't want to hear for 1 second about how expensive things are in Van. No? I know that the market is insane. I know land and everything is crazy expensive, but we're talking about $1 billion franchise. Like, just get it done.
Yeah.
It works in US dollars in a lot of cases. I mean,
well, this would be a Canadian expenditure, but no, I mean, you're
to the point.
You're quite right. Like, land is expensive in New York, in the Bay Area. This isn't the only place that land is expensive. So Marvelous stuff, Frank. Have a great week. We'll catch up next Friday.
Have a good weekend, guys.
This Sekeres Price clip brought to you by Applewood Auto Group. And remember,
It's all good at Applewood.